What if the moment you stop chasing people, stop refreshing their messages, stop waiting for their calls, stop shrinking yourself just to fit into their world? What if that is the exact moment your entire life begins to transform? What if the desperation they sensed in your pursuit was the very thing keeping them distant? What if your silence became louder than all your chasing ever was? What if the person you were running after finally turned around, not because you called them back, but because you had the courage to walk away? Today, we are going to talk about something that will shake the foundation of every relationship in your life. We are going to talk about why people respect you more when you stop meeting their validation, stop feeding their ego with your desperate attention, and start returning to the most powerful version of yourself. Because here is the shocking truth: the version of you that chases is the version of you that loses. But the version of you that stands still, stands tall, and stands in your own worth, that version wins every single time. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will change everything. What if the single greatest act of power you could perform right now in this very moment is to simply stop? Stop chasing, stop begging, stop shrinking, stop performing. What if stopping is not giving up, but actually waking up to who you truly are? There is a researcher, a storyteller, a woman who spent decades in the most uncomfortable rooms of human emotion, studying shame, vulnerability, courage, and worthiness. She sat with thousands of people, listened to their deepest fears, their most painful stories, their greatest heartbreaks, and from all of that raw human data, she emerged with one of the most powerful truths about human connection that the world has ever heard. She said, and I want you to hold these words close to your chest: you cannot get to courage without walking through vulnerability. But here is what most people misunderstand. Vulnerability is not chasing. Vulnerability is not begging. Vulnerability is not making yourself smaller so someone else feels bigger. Vulnerability, in its truest and most powerful form, is showing up fully, completely, and honestly, without any guarantee that the other person will meet you there. That is courage. That is what changes everything. Now let me ask you something deeply personal. Think about the last time you chased someone. Maybe it was a friend who slowly started pulling away. Maybe it was a partner who grew cold and distant. Maybe it was a colleague, a family member, or someone you admired whose approval you desperately wanted. You sent the extra message, you made the extra call. You bent your schedule, your emotions, your self-respect just to remain relevant in their world, and what happened? The more you chased, the further they moved. The more you needed them, the less they seemed to need you. The more you gave, the less they valued what you were offering. Does that feel familiar? Because it should. Because every single human being on this planet has lived that painful, exhausting, soul-crushing experience of chasing someone who is never going to stop running. Here is the shocking psychological truth that nobody tells you when you are in the middle of that pursuit. When you chase a person, when your entire emotional energy becomes directed toward gaining their approval, their attention, or their affection, you are sending them a deeply unconscious message. You are saying, I do not believe I am worth your attention unless I earn it. And people, whether consciously or not, receive that message loud and clear. They sense the desperation beneath your generosity. They feel the neediness beneath your kindness. They recognize the fear beneath your pursuit. And human beings, by nature, by psychology, by the deepest wiring of their instincts, do not respect fear. They do not value what is handed to them without effort. They do not treasure what they have not had to choose. This brilliant researcher whose work has touched millions of hearts across this planet, spent years trying to understand why some people live wholeheartedly and others spend their entire lives feeling unworthy of love and belonging. And what she discovered was both simple and devastating. The people who lived wholeheartedly, who had the richest relationships, the deepest connections, the most fulfilling lives, all shared one radical belief. They believed they were worthy of love and belonging before anyone else confirmed it, not after, before. They did not wait for someone to choose them to feel chosen. They had already chosen themselves, and that internal act of self-selection, that quiet but fierce decision to stand in your own worth, is what made them magnetic. That is what made people want to be around them. Not their perfection, not their performance, their wholeness. And this is where the paradox lives, the beautiful, breathtaking paradox that most people miss entirely because they are too busy running. When you stop chasing people, when you retract your desperate energy and bring it back to yourself, when you stop measuring your worth by who responds and who does not, something extraordinary happens. People notice. The very people who are walking away begin to pause. Not all of them, not the wrong ones, but the right ones, the ones who are worthy of your presence. They feel the shift. because you have changed the energy, you have changed the story. You are no longer saying, please choose me. You are saying, I have already chosen myself. And that is the most attractive, most powerful, most deeply respectful thing a human being can communicate without uttering a single word. She talks about the armor we wear, the thick, heavy, invisible armor that we build around our hearts when we are afraid of rejection, afraid of abandonment, afraid of not being enough. We chase because we are wearing that armor. We think that if we can just get close enough, if we can just prove ourselves worthy enough, if we can just be available enough, we can prevent the rejection that we are so terrified of. But here is what that armor actually does. It keeps out the very connection we are desperately seeking, because you cannot reach someone's heart with a fistful of fear. You cannot build intimacy through desperation. You cannot create genuine love through performance. The moment you put down that armor, the moment you decide that you will show up as exactly who you are, without apology, without performance, without the frantic energy of someone who needs to be chosen, that is the moment real connection becomes possible. That is the moment people begin to see you. Not the version of you that was trying so hard to be seen, the real you, the whole you, the you that was always worthy, even when you did not believe it. Think about the people in your life whom you respect the most deeply. Are they the ones who are always available, always eager, always bending themselves into shapes that made you comfortable? Or are they the people who had a quiet sense of dignity about them? The people who were warm and generous but never desperate? The people who clearly had a relationship with themselves that did not depend on your approval to remain intact? Those are the people who command respect, not because they are cold, not because they are distant, but because they are complete. They have done the hard, painful, courageous work of building a relationship with themselves first, and from that solid foundation, everything else in their lives becomes possible. She describes worthiness not as something we earn through accomplishment or through other people's approval, but as something we must claim. We must decide, sometimes in the face of every fear we have ever carried, that we are enough, not perfect, not finished, not without struggle, but enough, whole enough to stop chasing, worthy enough to stop begging, strong enough to stand still and let what is meant for us find us. Because here is what nobody tells you about the people who stop chasing. They do not end up alone. They do not end up rejected and forgotten. They end up surrounded by people who chose them freely, not because they were pursued, not because they were convenient, but because they were genuine, because they were real, because they had the courage to be exactly who they were without hiding behind the frantic energy of someone who needed to be loved. Your stillness is not weakness. Your boundaries are not walls. Your self-respect is not arrogance. They are the quiet, powerful language of a person who has finally come home to themselves. And when you come home to yourself, truly, deeply, completely, you will find that the right people have been waiting there all along. Not because you chased them, but because you finally stopped. Everything we have explored today leads back to one single transformative truth. Your worth was never something another person could give you, and it was never something their absence could take away. The moment you stop running toward people who are not moving toward you, you redirect that extraordinary energy back into yourself, and that is where everything changes. Respect is not demanded. It is not chased, it is not performed, it is earned in the quiet, dignified moments when you choose yourself with the same fierceness that you once chose others. The relationships worth having will always survive your stillness. The love worth keeping will always find its way to someone who is no longer running. Stand still, stand whole. Stand in the magnificent, unshakable truth of who you are, and watch how the world reorganizes itself around your courage.